This is the second part to my end of year tier list video on the end of Overdress era. So the first part is all about the right line, which you guys can check it out first, or you can just watch this one first and then go back to the first one. Both of them can be watched in any order because they are essentially kind of independent of one another. And as you can see here, today we're going to be talking about the booster packs. Essentially one of the most important aspects of a TCG, because it is the only way for you to either improve upon your older decks or trying out some brand new decks. And I'll have to say Overdress did a pretty okay job for most part. Like, most of the boosters are in the decent grade, but there are also as many of a bad booster in this era as well. And today I'm gonna be putting them all in a tier list. So just a few rulings here. For one, I'm gonna be prioritizing on how much the booster affects the meta, more so than whether it is worth it to whack a booster, though the worthiness of the booster will be taken into consideration as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. And I mean, we have collab deck also, so for those who are complaining or not happy about me not putting collab in my first tier list, there you go. Okay, let's start off with the DBTO1, and I can safely say DBTO1 is an easy A tier. This is such a good start to Overdress as a format, as it introduces a lot of cards that even after 2.5 years, you still see people trying to put some of the cards from this booster into their own deck. A very good example for these are things like Vanguard, Painkiller, Arcs, Spirit Condensation, and of course Boba Mine. A lot of these cards, and even in the triple R section, there are things like Eden and Alden, which are still being used after all this time. So this is a very good start of Overdress, which follow up with really Tiddly quite shitty follow up with DBTO 2 and 3, which I'm gonna put both in C tier, as they both there for the same reason. They are there to support specifically the OG boss. So things like Original Nirvana, Fat Chicken, the Violence Bruce, the Original Magnolia and such. A lot of these cards aged so poorly that after DBTO4 it loses relevancy. The only thing that still have some relevancy are some of the random tech choice like Fujika Madoka or Pandemonium Tactics, and of course the effect triggers. Then we have DBTO4, which easily for me an S tier. Not only it introduces us to the effect draw, it also introduces us to the grade 4 mechanic and some of the most important staples in many of the decks, and also some of the deck that did get supported specifically. So things like Shiagra, Aditya, Elite Pulse, Brainwash, and Pure Light. Like, a lot of the cards in this booster still being seen to play in the modern version of this deck until today. And not only that, it's also kind of like mark how Bushiroad will be supporting and improving the meta of the game over time, which is a little bit of a scary thought. But I have to admit, this is easily one of the most impactful boosters.
Of course!
Then we move on to DBTO5. Okay, this is a little bit of a special case in my opinion, because DBTO5 is also a 10th anniversary of the original BTO5, the intertwine of Twin Blades or something, if I remember the name correctly. Essentially, they really make it a heavy anniversary in the worst way possible by inflating Keter foils in this booster so much that anyone who trying to buy it for other nations just lose value instantly. Like, if you're trying to buy DBTO5 just to get some SP, don't. It's not worth your money, because yes, there are some good staples that you are using this booster like Folktail, Effect Heals, the Restand one, and Maple. Bushiroad intention to really marketed it to be like a huge nostalgia booster really backfire on this booster, and I don't know if this is the reason why they decided to renew the foil system to the current one that we have today. If that is the case, what else we can say about this booster is easily one of the worst, which is sad for me because it introduces to some of the spicy right line in Overdress as well, which are the
Cross Epic
units with things like Eva, Chaos, and of course Rorowa, which all of them over time has become a very respectable deck in the current meta as well. So a bit unfortunate that Bushiroad greed really overtake this booster.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Moving on to DBTO6 and to an extension DBTO7, the funny part about the time gap between DBTO5 and DBTO6 is the fact that during that short period of time we get a bunch of promo that really improve upon the DBTO5 decks and really make it really good. And I feel DBTO6, 7 and all the way until DBTO10 ever became relevant in the meta for almost a whole year. The booster during this period of time are pretty solid except for one. So for DBTO6 and 7, I'm gonna put it in B tier with DBTO6 is higher than BTO7 because both of them they're kind of like relevant for the similar reason. A lot of cards in these two boosters are still being heavily used in the current version of the deck until today. But here's the thing, these are archetype specific support, which are a little bit different from the DBTO2 and DBTO3 in the sense that those two boosters, the support are very specific to the name. Like for example, for Nirvana support, it literally named the full name of the original Nirvana, while DBTO6 and DBTO7 kind of have something along the line of like Nirvana in its name or Leonon in its name like that. And all the deck that was introduced in these boosters unfortunately wasn't able to touch the candle with Eva or Overlord at the time. So it is a good introductory and a support boost for the deck that was introduced in these two boosters. So things like Jiva, Lionon, Yusberg, Drudgerwell. But it also kind of like a groundwork that eventually will pay off in a much later booster. Then we have DBTO8, which I would say is a bit of an outlier because of the fact that for one, we were introduced to the Natureless card and how much Bushiroad decided to mark the bloody hell out of it. And I would say this, the right line that was introduced in this booster wasn't half bad, though it is definitely carried by Minerva. On top of that, the support that was intended for the
Lyrical Epic
unit are very good, and some of them even have generic purposes with things like Go Ahead Mikani and also the Pink Mod Girl Maple. So with all that considered, I'm gonna put BT8 in A tier. Just barely get into the A tier, you know, low A like that. Unfortunately for DBTO8 though, it was followed up by easily one of the worst booster in the existence, DBTO9. In terms of effects for the meta, this is the worst, but I feel it is still better than DBTO5 for the sense that it wasn't made to be a cash grab. It was made to be kind of like groundwork for last 4 main booster of the format. So some sacrifices has to be made, and a lot of new right line were introduced into this booster with things like Grifokilla, Wildmans, Grand Fear, Unica, and a Vanguard. So a lot of introductory card is introduced into this booster. In all fairness though, there is a few cards in this booster that still have some relevancy with things like on-hit booster like Sargon and etc. and also Clean Sweep Dragon. So it is not completely terrible, but it is definitely an obvious foundation booster for all of the side characters, most of them in the Overdress era, and I feel it is being a foundation booster actually makes the last 4 main booster looking a whole lot better. And we can start it immediately off with DBTO10, which will get an A tier. This is here for a few reasons. For one, in terms of meta, it introduces art with Gandiva and also Mars Mechanic, which thus introduces some of the newer deck to be in the top tier like Zorga and to an extent Leonon with like a bursty kind of like burst. But I would say what makes this booster so high in this list is in what it provided in this booster, as it introduces, at least for JP, Bank Dream Criticals and the Grade 2 Cycle card, two of easily the most sought after staples in the current format. I mean, this seems to die down a bit since then, but I feel this is easily one of the most influential booster in a sense that it shows that they are willing to improve upon the quality of generic cards. And I think this is also the last booster we see Bushiroad really supporting into the Brancate side of life, because since then Brancate seems to receive quite a lukewarm support. As you can see with the DBT11, which will be getting a B tier above the DBTO6. I mean, it is a very good follow-up to the
Lyrical Epic
stuff, and some of the new right line in the booster or the new boss unit like Greed on Mars, Vermilion, and SL were very solid deck on their own. But I think the only thing that kind of holds this back is the fact that it was introduced right in the middle of Mars, which is a little bit weird. It's as if they just want to get it done and over with supporting the
Lyrical Epic
units and then just preparing the big gun in the last two booster, which we can see with DBT12, which I'm gonna rank it below DBT10 because both of these booster has a really relevant cycle cards, but DBT10 has a little bit more word in it thanks to the Vanguard collab, and also DBT12 introduces us to easily one of the worst collab in the Overdress right now, and that is Gotobun, which why is it there to begin with? Like seriously, like if it is good in the meta for a while, then it would be great, but it immediately died once the next booster came. That just show to how short and whimsical the Gotobun collab was for the Vanguard. And in terms of meta wise, I would say a lot of old and new decks really gets a time to shine here, with things like Bastion, Orpheus, and the brand new deck Omena Grisho see some relevancy in the booster, and I can safely say this booster is a nice preparation for the finale that is DBT13, which will be getting an S tier. Okay, so DBT13 is, to me, if I compare this to any other booster in the form in the Vanguard existence, it would be GBT14, the last main booster of the G era, because that's how much the power level was changed during that period of time, and any deck that get a huge change in this booster became instantly relevant almost immediately, with things like Jiva, Leonon, Drajevo, Yusberg. These are the 4 decks that during the time of release were some of the best decks in the format. Unfortunately, for some of the decks, the relevancy start to drop immediately after the other booster release, but I would say DBT13 easily just prove us that we can go even harder when it comes to power creep, and some of you might consider power creep to be a bad thing, but for me, I'm okay with it. It's just a way for the game to really move on. But I'll have to say this also, I hope they do defensive creep properly in the Divines era. Okay, now that we cover all the main booster, let's move on to the main Lyrical booster, which is LBT01 to 4. And starting off with LBT01, I think is just right below DBT01. It's a very strong introduction to the Lyrical, and it does make a splash immediately. But it does make a too hard of a splash that they have to really pull it back with LBT02, which will be getting a D tier from me. I'm fully aware this is where they introduce all the effect trigger in for the Lyrical, but I feel all the supports in that booster are so shit that it's not even funny. And not only that, all the new right line in that booster is also really bad on launch. Like it Lyrical wait almost 2 years for these 2 decks, which is Fortia and Herminia, to actually get some proper boost that actually make it a meta relevant deck, which is not something they get in LBT03.
Emotional damage!
Which is there as a way for Bushido to just introduce some of the more modern cards into the system, and the only thing that you really care about this booster is the high res, the effect heals, and Yuiga. Unless you are interested in one of the new 6 right line, you won't just whack it, or like just whack on a whim like I do, you know. What I would say is worth whacking on a whim though, this is a real life experience, is LBT04, which will be getting a low A from me. It is a nice follow-up for Herminia and Fortia, and all the 5 new right line that was introduced were really good, and to be fair, all the support that were given in the booster does make a difference for the LBT03 deck as well, but it doesn't make enough of a splash for those decks to be in the meta relevancy again, so that's a little bit unfortunate. Personally for me, I think if you're looking to build a really cool deck, LBT04 is also the most worth it because it introduces us to Streya and Yuiga, which is 2 of the most powerful cards in Lyrical, and the only other Lyrical booster that actually is worth it is not even a Lyrical booster.
NANI?
As we move into the Festival Collection. Festival Collection is kind of like a reprint booster, so if you start Overdress late, this is the booster you go into either just blink out the card or just get a card that you are missing for the longest time due to the fact that the older booster no longer in print. So with that reason in mind, I'm gonna put the Festival Collection 1 and 2 into the same tier, with Festival 2 beating Festival 1 because Festival 2 does introduce some cards that does make an effect in the meta, and also how some of the deck is played with things like Grave Saga, Office Regis, and Amelia for Nirvana.
How could this happen?
Yeah, and there's not much to say about this 2 deck. It's just reprint booster, simple as that. What I have to say to be, in my opinion, surprisingly the most impactful booster of Overdress era is easily Festival Collection 3. Normally, it introduces a proper boost to the DBT01 units. So Clarissa, Alessia, Fealty Rosa, Vista, and Loro Nero. It also introduces us to 2 new regular pieces and 2 new OT, making the deck building option expand for almost every single deck possible because, you know, being a generic OT. And not only that, it also reprints a lot of crucial cards for all nations. The only thing that I have to critique about this booster is just that it is short printed, which does inflate the price of some of the cards very crazily. Though I'm glad that they decided to reprint some of them in the upcoming Divines booster. Okay, then we have to talk about the last booster of the whole festival collection, the Triple Drive booster. And I can easily say Triple Drive booster is the best out of the festival collection in terms of bang for your buck. Like if you are looking to get a high rarity stuff, some reprints and everything, this is a booster you go for, except if you are Lyrical Main, because it is such a huge reprint for a lot of decks that are used in the anime that if you just started the Overdress right now and you're looking to build some of the more expensive deck like Usberg or Drudgeable, this is a booster for you to get some of the more relevant pieces and expensive ones so that you can actually play the deck properly. Of course that you still need some of the external support like DBT13, but let's be real here, it does reduce the cost of admission at least by $100+, which is still a substantial amount. Actually, because of that, I'm willing to put it up into B tier actually. The fact that you can play some of the more expensive deck and some expensive and good deck at a much cheaper price, it deserves to be bumped more. Okay, editing back here, I decided to say this after the record this once because I feel it is important to say. Triple Drive Booster is a limited run, so if you are looking to get it, try to get it in a batch, like a few booster, maybe share it with your friend or something, just to increase the chance of you getting all the cards that you need, and also essentially, you know, just pay less for getting more foils, I guess. But that is pretty much for most of the main Vanguard booster. Now let's move on to the title booster, which is Collab Nations booster. So start off with Token Ranbu D tier. It barely make a splash. No one remembers it until the title booster 2 came around for Token Ranbu, so that's saying a lot. Monstrike C tier as well. Everyone barely can remember the first few title booster except for one because they make almost no splash in the meta at all. The first one that actually make a meta relevancy is actually Shaman King, the first one, which are willing to put in A tier. I remember during the Shaman King era where a lot of people just play Yo just so that you can get a lot of pressure and just kill the opponent with the Shaman King OT, which literally just deal a damage. So overall, this is definitely a huge booster, and I think the only shake to Eva and some of the deck during that time before it just completely forgotten in the Shaman King booster 2, which I'm gonna put it below like Triple Drive booster. It is a good follow-up, but I feel like just like the DBT01 and LBT01, they have to push such a huge break to the support that it doesn't make as much of a splash that it could have been, and because of that, B tier. And then we have the last 3 booster, so Monstrike Volume 2, Token to Volume 2, and Ragnarok. I will keep Ragnarok for the last because I want to do something special to it, but to put it simply, both of the Token Volume 2 and Monstrike Volume 2 will be getting A tier behind the DBT12, with Token Ranbu leading the Monstrike. The reason behind this is because I'm of the fact that for Monstrike, only one deck actually make a huge splash out of like 6-7 different builds that it introduces there, and that's Ebisu. And Ebisu is still being played here and there in Japan meta until today, though the restriction really hurts the deck a lot, so I think it will be a while before the deck got released. So until then, it will be in A tier. And then for Token Ranbu, there were at least 3 decks that was introduced that became meta and I think still is meta for a while, which are Muneshika, Kasho, and also Training 2. I'm not sure which Training 2, but one of them. Overall, I think Token Ranbu is just literally, it's like an opposite of what they did to DBT01. They know Token Ranbu was so shit on launch, so they decided to give easily some of the best booster they can get, and it literally make a lot of deck meta in an instant, so props for that. And then for Ragnarok, give me a second.
One eternity later.
Who is Ragnarok? Like seriously, who is Ragnarok again? Cause when it came out, I completely forget that it came out, the booster came out, just like, oh, there's nothing much to do about Vanguard this month. And I completely forgot that this booster exists. And in all honesty, it was okay. Like it was like, you know, like how Ragnarok is about a close group of gods and humans fighting against each other with their powers, and it's kind of like a very close tournament. The same thing can be said with this booster. It is its own thing, and it doesn't really give a fuck about anything else. It just do whatever it wants, and that's how I feel about Ragnarok in my opinion. And for those who want to really know the true ranking of it, I would just put it like a high C to low B, like somewhere here. But seriously, who's Ragnarok? And that is pretty much it for this tier list. I'm apologize if like there is not as much work putting in compared to my right line tier list video, because I have to work with a much shorter time frame here. So do leave down the comments. What do you guys think of some of these boosters? Do I overhype or underhype in some of them? And yeah, that is pretty much about it. And this is Mac Mechanic. See you guys in 2024.